The Galactic Council chamber sat at the heart of Prime, a space station so massive that entire fleets could hide in its shadow. The chamber itself was a perfect circle, with representatives seated in a great ring. The walls glowed with soft blue light. The air was cold and smelled like metal and something else, something that had no name in human language. Captain Brooks sat in the human section, a small designated area that had been added just 5 years ago. He was 53 years old, with gray at his temples and lines around his eyes from too many difficult decisions. He wore the blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps. On his sleeve was a single star, marking him as the official representative of humanity to the Galactic Council. Around him sat the representatives of civilizations that had existed for millions of years. The sat to his left. They looked like enormous insects made of crystal, their bodies refracting light into rainbow patterns. To his right were the Etherians, beings of pure energy contained in fields that made the air shimmer. Beyond them sat the, who resembled floating but with minds older than human written history. And dozens of other species, each one ancient beyond measure. Elder raised one of his crystalline limbs. The sound of the council chamber shifted slightly, a soft vibration that meant the ancient one was about to speak. "The dimensional rift grows larger," said. His voice sounded like glass chiming in a wind. "In the past month alone, it has consumed 3 star systems. The entities coming through are unlike anything we have encountered. Our combined military forces have attempted to contain them, but we lack understanding of their nature." A holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed a map of space near the outer rim of explored territory. A red void marked the location of the rift. Around it were markers indicating destroyed systems. Entire civilizations gone. Kept his face calm. This was what he did. He listened, he observed, and he waited for the right moment to speak. Ambassador Lisa Warren sat behind. She was younger, only 32, with sharp eyes and the kind of intelligence that made older diplomats uncomfortable. She had insisted on coming to this session. "We need to see how they think," she had told before they arrived. "We need to understand what they value and what they fear." Speaker, or the mediator of the council, raised his hand. His species was called the ephemeral, and he looked like a humanoid figure made of shifting colors. He had been mediating council disputes for 300,000 years. "What does the military collective propose?" or asked. A commander named floated forward. His tentacles writhed with agitation. "We propose a blockade. We gather all available forces and create a barrier the entities cannot cross. Then we collapse the rift from our side." "And the cost?" or asked. "Significant, perhaps 5% of our combined fleet, but the alternative is the loss of all explored space." Listen to the discussion that followed. The ancient races debated strategy. They discussed numbers and probabilities and historical precedents. Some suggested retreating to the galactic core and letting the outer territories fall. Others wanted to attack preemptively through the rift itself. After 2 hours, Elder raised his crystalline limb again. The council chamber fell silent. "The youth races must be considered," said. His words were careful, measured. "Humanity has been in our presence for only 5 years. They have contributed nothing of value to the galactic community. They have no ancient knowledge. They have no proven military strength. I propose we exclude them from this decision. Let them remain protected in their solar system while the elder races handle this threat." Felt Lisa shift behind him. He knew she wanted to stand up to fight back. He placed a single hand on the armrest of his seat, a signal to wait. "The humans are part of the council," Speaker or said. "They have the right to speak." Stood, he did not rush. He did not show anger. He simply stood and waited until all eyes in the chamber turned toward him. When he spoke, his voice was quiet enough that everyone had to listen carefully to hear him. Elder began, "You are correct that humans are young. We are correct that we have no ancient knowledge to offer. We are correct that our military is small compared to your great fleets." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "But I ask you to consider something. Each of your civilizations has been alive for millions of years. You have seen the universe grow old. You have seen the same patterns repeat again and again. You have learned wisdom through repetition and time, but what you have not seen is something truly new." Gestured toward the holographic display showing the rift. "This is new. This is something your millions of years of experience cannot fully understand, because you have never been young enough to be confused by something you have never seen before. Humans have always been young. We have always been confused by things we did not understand, and we have always found ways to survive anyway. Elder's crystalline form shifted slightly. This might have been surprise. I'm not asking for command of this operation, continued. I am not asking to lead your fleets. I am asking for one thing: the chance to contribute. Send one human research vessel. Send one team of human scientists and engineers. Let us look at this problem without the weight of millions of years of assumptions. Let us see what a young mind sees. If we fail, you lose nothing. If we succeed, you gain a fresh perspective on an impossible problem. The council chamber was completely silent. Lisa Warren held her breath. She had known for 3 years, had worked with him through a dozen diplomatic crises. But she had never heard him speak like this, with such clarity, such confidence. Speaker or inclined his head slightly. The human representative has made a reasonable request. We will vote. The vote was not close, but it was not unanimous either. 17 species voted to allow humanity to contribute one research vessel. 3 voted against, 7 abstained. The motion passed. That knight stood in the observation port of the human quarters aboard Prime. He looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the dimensional rift continued to grow. Somewhere, creatures from another reality were trying to survive in a universe that could not contain them. Lisa Warren found him there. "You were brilliant," she said. "I was terrified," replied. "I still am." "What do you think we will find out there?" Looked at the stars for a long time before answering. "I think we will find something that cannot be solved with weapons or ancient strategies. I think we will find something that requires us to be exactly what we are, young enough to be confused and brave enough to act anyway." He paused. "I want you to lead the expedition. You have the scientific knowledge and the diplomatic skills. More than that, you have the courage to think in ways the ancient races cannot." Lisa's eyes widened. That could be a death sentence. "Yes," said simply. "It could be. But it could also be the moment humanity proves it deserves to survive in this universe." Lisa looked out at the stars alongside him. She thought about Earth, about the billions of people whose future depended on choices made by a handful of humans in a distant chamber. She thought about the challenge ahead. The Pathfinder was smaller than it expected. It was only 300 meters long, with a crew of 200 scientists, engineers, and military personnel. The ship had been built for exploration, not combat. Its hull was from previous missions, and the walls inside hummed with the sound of overtaxed systems. Dr. Hayes stood in the laboratory on Deck 4, staring at the data displays. He had not slept in 28 hours. His dark hair was uncombed. Coffee stains marked the front of his uniform. He was 51 years old and had spent the last 2 decades studying alien biology and physics. His daughter had been in the colony on Station when the rift appeared. Station no longer existed. "The patterns do not match anything in our database," said to his assistant, Ensign Daniel Foster. Daniel was 24, brilliant, and still carried the kind of optimism that came from having not yet lost everything. "Maybe we are looking at it wrong," Daniel suggested. He leaned over the display, his young eyes scanning the data with fresh perspective. "What if the entities are not attacking the space itself? What if they are passing through it?" Looked at his young assistant. "Explain." "All our models assume the entities are trying to break through the rift to reach this dimension. But what if the rift broke them? What if they are trying to escape from something worse?" Felt something shift in his mind. In 20 years of research, surrounded by the oldest minds in the galaxy, he had never heard that question asked. Commander Stone entered the laboratory. She was 47, with the kind of presence that made people immediately stand at attention. She had served in Earth's military for 30 years and had seen combat on 3 different worlds. Behind her came a small containment pod, held by 2 security officers. Inside the pod, something moved, a small fragment of crystalline matter that seemed to exist partially outside of normal space. "We got lucky," said. "A patrol caught this drifting near the outer marker. It is a small juvenile entity, inactive but still alive." And Daniel exchanged looks. This was what they had been waiting for. "Set it up in isolation chamber 3, ordered. "We need to be extremely careful. We do not know what it is capable of." 2 hours later, stood before a massive transparent barrier. On the other side, the crystalline entity floated in a field of suspended energy. It was no larger than a human fist, but it seemed to bend space around itself in ways that hurt to look at directly. "Beginning contact protocol," said into his recorder. His hands moved across the control panel with practiced precision. He activated the scanning arrays, feeding them information about the entity, taking readings of its structure, its energy signature, its dimensional state. The entity suddenly moved. It stopped floating aimlessly and turned to face the barrier, stepped back. "It knows we are here," Daniel said from behind him. "Yes," confirmed, "it is aware." For the next 6 hours, and Daniel worked to establish communication. They sent mathematical sequences first, the universal language of science. The entity did not respond. They sent sound waves, light patterns, and energy pulses, still nothing. Then Daniel had an idea. "What if it communicates through emotion?" Daniel asked. "What if that is why all the ancient races have failed? They are looking for language, but what if there is no language?" Looked at his young assistant again. In that moment, he understood why Brooks had insisted on bringing young humans on this mission. They did not yet have the weight of millions of years of assumptions pressing down on them. Activated a new protocol. Instead of sending information, he sent empathy. He activated the ship's medical sensors and used them to broadcast the basic biological patterns of fear, confusion, and the desperate need to survive. He fed the entity information about loss, about grief, about the death of loved ones. The entity began to glow. Slowly, carefully received something back. Not words, not even clear thoughts, but sensations, images, and feelings that formed a kind of meaning in his mind. The entity was lost. It was terrified. It had been separated from its group. It did not understand where it was or what had happened to the dimension it had been born into. It only knew that everything was wrong. Felt tears forming in his eyes. He understood that feeling completely. "We need to establish a name," said, "something to identify this individual." "Call it essence," Daniel suggested. "Because what we are receiving from it, that is the essence of what it is, just the core of being, nothing more complex than that." Sent the name to essence, along with the feeling of acceptance and safety. The entity glowed brighter. Commander Stone watched from the observation room above. She had served with for 3 years. She had never seen him cry. "He is compromised," her security chief said. "We should remove him from the research." "No," said, "this is exactly what we need. The ancient races have been trying to destroy the entities for months. They have gathered data, studied patterns, and planned strategies. None of it has worked. Maybe it is time to try something else." The next morning, Lisa Warren called a conference in the command center, presented his findings. The research vessels from the 5 ancient races that had contributed ships were all listening via secure channel. "The entities are not invading," began. His voice was steady now, professional, despite the exhaustion and emotion beneath the surface. "They are refugees. A dimensional catastrophe forced them to escape their native reality. Our dimension is not their home. They do not want to be here any more than we want them here." The response from the ancient race representatives was immediate and harsh. "Impossible," said Commander Vex of the fleet. "We have detected weapons-grade energy signatures. We have observed aggressive formations. This is an invasion force." "They are scared," said simply. "Scared creatures sometimes appear aggressive. When a threatened animal backs away from a predator, it might look like an attack. That does not make it so." "This is speculation," another voice said. "We need hard data." "Then come and see," Lisa Warren interjected. She had been listening carefully to every word. She understood what was truly saying, what his data actually meant. "Come and meet Essence. See with your own eyes that we are not dealing with mindless invaders. We are dealing with conscious beings who are as confused and frightened as we are." There was a long silence. "If we do this," Commander Vex finally said, "and we find that you are wrong, hundreds of thousands will die." "If we do not do this," Lisa replied, "and we find that you were right all along, we can still choose to destroy them. But we will never know if there was another way. We will never know if we chose to commit genocide when we could have chosen mercy." Something in those words reached across the distance. Something in the simple human logic of it, the uncomplicated way of seeing the problem that came from a species only 5 years into galactic society. By that evening, representatives from 3 of the 5 ancient race fleets had agreed to send observers to the Pathfinder. Commander Stone prepared the security detail, and Daniel continued to deepen their communication with Essence, and Lisa Warren recorded a message to Brooks back on Prime. Brooks stood before the Galactic Council once again, but this time was different. This time, he was not asking for permission. He was presenting a challenge to everything the ancient races believed about themselves. The data spread across the central display. Charts showing Essence's biological patterns, recordings of the emotional transmissions between and the young entity. Scientific analysis proving that the dimensional rift was not a weapon or invasion portal, but a wound in the fabric of space itself. "The creature you see here is not a threat," said. His voice filled the chamber with quiet authority. "It is a victim. Its entire species is fleeing from a catastrophe we have not yet identified, but we know this: they are not trying to conquer us. They are trying to survive." Elder's crystalline form shifted. The movement was small, but saw it. The ancient was listening in a way he had not listened before. "You are asking us to accept the word of humans over the judgment of millions of years of military experience," Commander Vex said. The commander was angry, his tentacles writhing in sharp, aggressive patterns. "This is madness. Your species has been in existence for less time than it took us to build one of our cities." "Yes," agreed. "We are young, but that is exactly why we can see what you cannot." He activated a different display. Images appeared, scenes from Earth's history, from human conflicts, from moments when young people had made moral choices that changed the course of history. "We have a long history of protecting the vulnerable," continued. "Long before we reached the stars, we learned that compassion is not weakness, it is strength. The strongest humans have always been those willing to sacrifice themselves for others. We have built our entire civilization on this principle." "Sentiment," another council member said dismissively, "not logic." "Are they different?" asked. He stepped closer to the central display. "Logic tells us that destroying the entities will eliminate a threat. But what is a threat? Something that can harm us, or something that we do not understand and therefore fear." Elder raised a crystalline limb. The council chamber fell silent. "I have a question," said. His voice was thoughtful now, less harsh than before. "In all the time humans have existed, this brief time as you call it, have you ever encountered something you did not understand?" Felt the weight of the question. He understood what was really asking. He understood the challenge hidden beneath the words. "Many times," said. "We encounter things we do not understand constantly. The difference is that we do not assume they are threats simply because they are unfamiliar. We investigate. We attempt to communicate. We try to find common ground before we choose violence." "And when you are wrong," asked, "when your compassion leads you to trust something untrustworthy?" "Then we have made a mistake," said simply. "But at least we will have made it trying to save a life, not trying to take one." There was silence in the council chamber, but this time the silence felt different. Something had shifted. Some of the ancient representatives were actually considering the human perspective. Across the galaxy, in a military command center on Earth, General watched the transmission from the council chamber. He was 71 years old, with 50 years of military service, and 3 wars fought for ideals he still believed in. "The captain has made his argument," said to his staff. "Now we prepare for the consequences." His aide, Colonel Sarah Martinez, looked confused. "What do you mean, sir?" "The ancient races will vote," explained. "If they vote against us, they will attempt to destroy the entities. If we do not support that decision, we will be declaring open defiance against the Galactic Council. The political consequences could be severe. They could isolate us. They could withdraw their protection. They could even decide that humanity is too much of a problem to tolerate." "And what will you do?" Martinez asked. Looked at the display showing the Galactic Council chamber. He thought about the young people at the Pathfinder. He thought about Lisa Warren and Hayes, standing against the combined authority of civilizations millions of years old. "What any parent would do," he said. "I will stand behind our children even if the entire universe stands against us." Back in the council chamber, the debate continued for hours. The ancient races argued among themselves. Some wanted to support humanity's proposal. Others insisted that mercy in the face of potential threat was suicide. The discussion became heated. Crystal voices chimed discordantly. Energy signatures flared and dimmed. Finally, speaker or raised his hand for the final vote. "We will decide the fate of the dimensional refugees. We vote on the following. Do we permit humanity's research team to continue attempting communication with the entities, or do we authorize immediate military action to seal the rift and destroy all creatures attempting to cross it?" The vote was closer this time. 12 species voted to allow humanity to continue. 9 voted for military action. 4 abstained. The motion to permit communication passed by the narrowest margin. But the victory felt hollow, could see it in the faces of the ancient representatives. They were not convinced. They were simply giving humanity a chance, perhaps out of curiosity, perhaps out of respect for the argument that had been made. But they were not believers. That night, Lisa Warren sent an emergency transmission from the Pathfinder. "We have discovered something critical," she said. Her voice was urgent, breathless. "Has established deep communication with Essence. The young entity has given us information about what is happening. The rift was not a natural phenomenon. It was created deliberately by a dying civilization, who were fleeing from something worse, something they called the Void Eaters. These entities are not just refugees. They are refugees from genocide. If we do not help them, an entire species will be erased from existence." Felt something break open inside his chest. He understood now. This was not just about whether humans could prove themselves to the ancient races. This was about whether any civilized society could choose to let innocents die when they had the power to save them. He activated the council broadcast. "I need to say something to this council," said. His voice was different now, harder, more resolute. "I came here asking for tolerance. I came here asking to be heard. But I realize now that I should have been asking for something else. I should have been asking if we deserve to call ourselves civilized." He paused, letting the words settle. The dimensional refugees are not just alone. They are the last survivors of an entire species. If we do nothing, if we choose to destroy them or seal them away, we will be committing genocide, not out of self-defense, out of fear, out of the simple human choice to be comfortable rather than moral. He looked directly at Elder. "You asked me what happens when humans are wrong about compassion. I will tell you what happens. We live with it. We carry it. And we spend the rest of our lives learning from that mistake. But I will not let fear make us wrong this time. I will not let the terror of the unknown override the certainty that there are innocents who need help." Took a breath. "Humanity will lead the rescue effort. We will attempt to stabilize the rift. We will guide the refugees safely through. If the Council wishes to stop us, you will have to go through our fleet. And General tells me that Earth is prepared to defend that position with everything we have." The council chamber erupted in chaos. Ancient representatives shouted in their alien languages, or struck his speaker's gavel again and again, trying to restore order. But something unexpected happened. Ships began breaking formation. A dreadnought transmitted coordinates showing it was moving to support the human position. Then an Etherian cruiser, then 2 more vessels from other species. Elder transmitted a message to the council. "I stand with the humans on this matter. We are old. We have seen much. But this young species has reminded us of something we forgot, that the measure of a civilization is not how long it has lived, but what it chooses to do with the power it has been given." The vote was being taken again, but this time it did not matter. The military support for humanity's position was growing by the hour. The ancient races were being forced to make a choice: stand aside and let the rescue happen, or fight against a growing alliance that included both humans and their own people. The Pathfinder moved directly into the center of the dimensional rift, a single ship penetrating the wound in space itself. Lisa Warren stood on the bridge, her hands gripping the armrests of her captain's chair. Around her, crew members worked frantically at their stations, monitoring systems that were never designed to operate this close to such a powerful spatial anomaly. "Status report," Lisa commanded. "Shields at 80%, her chief engineer reported. "Hull integrity stable, but we are detecting cascading stress on the structural supports. We cannot remain at this position for more than 2 hours without risking complete system failure." Behind Lisa, Commander Stone stood with her security team. The military commander was grimly watching the weapons displays. Outside the Pathfinder, at least 30 alien warships had taken position between the human vessel and the massive fleet that was approaching from the galactic core. Those ships, the ones commanded by the faction that still believed the entities must be destroyed, were fully armed and ready to fire. "They are charging weapons," said quietly. Lisa nodded. She had known this moment was coming. She activated the ship-wide communication system. "All hands, this is the captain," she said. Her voice was steady, calm. "We are about to take defensive position near the dimensional rift. We may come under fire. Each of you signed up for this mission knowing the risks. I want you to know that what we are doing here matters. We are not just trying to survive. We are trying to prove that the universe can choose compassion instead of fear. Whatever happens next, know that humanity will be remembered for making that choice. Stay at your posts. Do your duty. And know that I am proud of each and every one of you." She cut the communication. "That was a nice speech," said. "I meant every word," Lisa replied. In the laboratory, Dr. Hayes and Ensign Daniel Foster worked on the final phase of the communication protocol. They had established a deep connection with Essence, but now they needed to do something unprecedented. They needed to make the entity understand that help was coming. Activated the biological pattern transmitter one final time. He sent images of other species arriving, of ships gathering, of unified intent. He sent the feeling of many different voices joining together in a single purpose: rescue. Essence responded with emotion so intense that had to steady himself against the console. The young entity was expressing joy, hope, but also fear. There was still something coming through the rift, something worse than the refugees. "Daniel, look at this reading," said. The young ensign studied the data. His face went pale. "That energy signature is massive. It is only partially in our dimension right now, but when it comes fully through, it will destroy everything." Finished. "The Void Eaters, the thing that we're running from." Outside, the first shots were fired. The ancient race fleet opened fire on the protective barrier of ships defending the Pathfinder. Weapons fire lit up the darkness of space like false stars. The dreadnoughts moved to intercept the attack. A Etherian cruiser took a direct hit and exploded, its energy form dissipating into the void. Lisa felt the Pathfinder shudder from the impact of a nearby explosion. "Return fire," commanded. The Pathfinder was not a warship. Its defensive systems were minimal. But the human vessel had something the ancient races did not expect: a crew willing to die for what they believed in. The ship maneuvered with impossible precision, positioning itself directly between the attacking warships and the dimensional rift. "Captain, incoming transmission from Elder," someone called out. Lisa opened the channel. The ancient's voice filled the bridge. "We are moving to intercept the attack force. Hold your position. We will protect you." "Thank you," Lisa said simply. "Do not thank me," replied. "Thank that young ensign who taught me something I had forgotten, that the value of a life is not measured in years but in choices, and you humans make very interesting choices." The battle intensified. More ships joined the protective barrier. The firing became so heavy that space itself seemed to be tearing apart. And then, in the center of it all, something changed. The dimensional rift began to collapse. Not from weapons fire, not from external force, but because Hayes had activated an emergency sequence. He was sealing the rift from the inside, even as the refugees were still crossing through. Lisa understood immediately what he was doing, was timing it perfectly. Seal the rift just before the Void Eaters could fully enter this dimension, trapping them in the dimensional space between realities while allowing the refugees to complete their escape. "All personnel prepare for emergency jump to secondary position," Lisa ordered. "We are leaving the rift zone in 60 seconds. The Pathfinder fired its engines at maximum power. The small research vessel, never designed for such extreme maneuvers, accelerated away from the dimensional tier. Behind them, initiated the final lockdown sequence. The computers in the laboratory calculated perfectly, closing the dimensional gateway at the exact moment the last entity crossed through. The Void Eaters, caught between dimensions, were sealed away. A catastrophe that could have destroyed civilizations was prevented by humans willing to act with absolute clarity and absolute sacrifice. But Daniel were still in the laboratory as the rift collapsed. Stone saw the readings on her screen and understood what had happened. She looked at Lisa, and in that moment no words were necessary. They both knew what sacrifice looked like. Then something impossible occurred. Energy patterns appeared on every display simultaneously. The pattern was Essence, and it was moving with purpose. The young entity that had shown so much compassion to, that had received nothing but kindness from a human scientist grieving his own loss, was using the last of its power to reach backward through the closing rift. And Daniel felt a pulling sensation. The entity was grabbing them, pulling them out of the collapsing dimensional space. For a moment, they were suspended between realities, held safe by the consciousness of a creature they had treated as something worth saving. Essence pushed them both toward the Pathfinder. a final act of sacrifice mirroring the sacrifice was making for the refugees. They crashed onto the deck of the ship, alive, gasping, barely conscious. Around them, the crew of the Pathfinder rushed to help them. Stone knelt beside them, checking for injuries, finding them battered but breathing. Outside, the dimensional rift sealed completely. The Void Eaters were trapped. The refugees were safe. And the ancient race fleet stopped firing. Every ship in the surrounding space seemed to hold its breath. Lisa Warren left the bridge and went to the laboratory. She found sitting on the floor, staring at nothing. She sat down beside him. "Your daughter would be proud," she said softly. Looked at her with tears running down his face. "I felt her die. I have carried that weight every day for 3 months, but I think that weight bought us something. It bought us the ability to understand what it means to lose everything, and that understanding saved them." In the hours that followed, something shifted in the galaxy. The ancient race's broadcasts were filled with debate and discussion. Many of the elder species representatives were struggling with what they had witnessed. A young ensign with a simple idea had prevented catastrophe. A grieving scientist had chosen compassion over vengeance. And an entire refugee species had been saved because humans believed that some things mattered more than fear. Elder transmitted a message directly to Brooks. "Your species has shown us something we had forgotten, that wisdom and strength are not measured in years, but in the willingness to do what is right even when it costs everything. We were wrong to dismiss you as adolescents. You have aged 1,000,000 years in a single day." Received the message in his quarters on Prime. He thought about Lisa Warren and Hayes and Daniel Foster and Stone. He thought about the billions of people on Earth who had believed in them enough to risk everything. "No," he transmitted back. "We were young until today. Today, humanity became what it was always meant to be. No 3 years had passed since the dimensional rift sealed. 3 years since the day that changed everything." On Earth, in a quiet garden in the capital city, Brooks walked alongside Elder. The ancient looked smaller in sunlight than he did in the council chamber. His crystalline form reflected the morning light into 1,000 colors. "This is beautiful," said. His voice was gentler now than it had been 3 years ago. "Your planet has great beauty." "We have many beautiful places," replied. "We only recently learned to preserve them. For most of human history, we destroyed the things we loved. But eventually, we learned that beauty is worth protecting." They walked through the garden together. Flowers from a dozen different worlds grew side by side. There were earth flowers, bright red and yellow, growing next to the luminescent blooms and the crystalline plants that had been brought from the Etherian territories. Each species maintained its own character, but together they created something more beautiful than any of them could create alone. "That is a good metaphor," said, stopping to examine a particularly striking arrangement of flowers from 3 different species blooming together. "For what you have done with the galaxy." Smiled. 3 years ago, such a statement would have seemed impossible. Humanity, a species barely into the galactic community, was now recognized as a leading power in the Alliance. But it had not happened through military strength or political maneuvering. It had happened because humans had been willing to do what the ancient races had forgotten how to do. They had chosen mercy. In a research facility orbiting Mars, Dr. Hayes was no longer grieving. He still missed his daughter. That pain would never fully go away. But he had channeled that loss into something meaningful. He led the joint research initiative between humans and the refugees. Together, they were developing new technologies that would allow other dimensional tiers to be sealed safely without causing harm to either reality. Beside him in the laboratory was one of the younger, a being of energy and consciousness who had learned to work in human environments. Its name was translated roughly as Essence, though it was not the same entity that had saved and Daniel. That essence had given all its remaining power to the rescue and could not maintain consciousness in this dimension. But its sacrifice had given all the other the chance to survive and thrive. "The mathematics are elegant," the younger essence said. "Your species approaches problems with such directness. Where we might spiral into theoretical complications, you simply ask the fundamental question, does this work?" Laughed. "That is basically human strategy for everything. Keep trying until something works." "It is more effective than it should be," Essence observed. Somewhere on Earth, Daniel Foster was teaching a class at the University of Earth. He was no longer an ensign. He was now a recognized researcher and educator, bringing together human students and young members of various alien species to learn together. In his classroom, Young minds worked on problems that would have seemed impossible just 3 years ago. A human student asked a scholar, "Do you really think humans can understand consciousness the way you do?" The answered, "We are beginning to understand that understanding comes in many forms. Humans do not understand the way we understand, but humans understand compassion in ways we must relearn. Perhaps that is enough." Lisa Warren stood before the Galactic Council, but this time she was not asking for permission or defending humanity's position. She was proposing new initiatives, new ways of approaching galactic problems that combine the ancient wisdom of the elder races with the fresh perspective that humans brought. "We propose establishing a joint council dedicated to solving the problems that the older councils have deemed impossible," Lisa said. "This council would include humans, younger alien species, and select members of the ancient races who were willing to think in new ways. We are not suggesting that the established structure is wrong. We are suggesting that alongside it, we need a space for unconventional thinking. We need a place where young minds can work with ancient minds, where different perspectives create better solutions." The proposal passed with surprising support. Even Commander Vex, who had opposed humanity's rescue efforts, voted in favor. He had come to understand that challenging the old ways did not mean disrespecting age and wisdom. It meant being willing to learn from different sources of knowledge. Brooks and Elder continued their walk through the Earth Garden. They talked about many things. They talked about politics and strategy, about philosophy and history. But mostly, they talked about the future. "Do you ever regret your initial opposition to humanity?" asked. Was silent for a long time. "Yes," he finally said. "I regret not seeing clearly. I regret the assumption that age meant understanding. But I do not regret standing corrected. That is how learning happens after all, not by being right, but by being willing to be wrong." "That is very wise," said. "That is very old," corrected gently. "I have had millions of years to learn not to be arrogant. Your species seems to be learning it much faster. That is either very wise or very lucky, perhaps both." They came to the center of the garden, where a memorial had been placed. The memorial honored those who had died in conflicts related to the dimensional crisis, including Essence and the many alien soldiers who had given their lives to protect the refugees. But it also honored something else, the moment when fear could have won and compassion won instead. "I brought your people to this planet to show them something," said. He gestured across the garden. "I wanted them to see that beauty is not found in individual perfection. It is found in different things growing together, in different perspectives combining to create something none of them could create alone." "And now you show it to me," observed. "I wanted to make sure you understood," said, "that humanity's victory was not really a victory, it was an invitation. We invited the galaxy to be better than it was, not older, not more powerful, better, more compassionate, more wise in the ways that matter." His crystalline form glowed softly in the sunlight. "I understand now. I have been on this journey for 3 years, and I am only now beginning to comprehend what your people accomplished. You did not defeat the ancient races. You reminded them who they were supposed to be." Above them, the sky began to change as the sun moved toward evening. And in that sky, visible now that the ancient restrictions had been lifted, humans could see the joint deep space stations that humanity had helped create. They moved through the darkness like new stars, symbols of cooperation between species that had once seemed too different to ever work together. On the Pathfinder, now serving as a research and refugee assistance vessel, Commander Stone reviewed the mission logs. 3 years of successful operations, 3 years of helping the adapt to their new dimension, 3 years of showing that military strength could be used for protection instead of conquest. She received a transmission from Earth. It was a message from Brooks, addressed to everyone who had served on the Pathfinder during the crisis. "To the brave souls who stood against fear when fear seemed reasonable," the message began. "To those who chose compassion when compassion meant risk, I want you to know that the galaxy will remember what you did, not as a military victory, not as a political triumph, but as a moment when one species, newly arrived among ancient powers, chose to be better, to be more human, which is to say, to choose mercy. The universe thought we were young and foolish, but we have shown that youth can bring wisdom. We have shown that new perspectives can solve old problems. And we have shown that the greatest strength is often found in our willingness to sacrifice everything for someone we have never met, from a species we have never known, simply because it was the right choice to make." Lisa Warren, now holding the title of Ambassador at Large for Humanity, sent her own message, directed specifically at young humans considering careers in space exploration and diplomacy. "When I was your age, I wondered if humans had anything to offer the galaxy," her message said. "The ancient races had millions of years of experience. They had technology beyond our understanding. They had power that we could barely comprehend. But what they did not have was innocence. They did not have the ability to see a problem without the weight of past assumptions crushing their vision. They did not have the courage to choose mercy when mercy meant risk. You have that. Each of you has that simply by being young, simply by being human. Use it. The galaxy needs it, I promise you that." Hayes, standing in his laboratory with Essence, received a final transmission from his daughter's colony. It was a message that had been recorded 3 years ago, before Station was destroyed. His daughter, only 12 years old, had recorded it as a birthday message for his upcoming 51st birthday. "Hi, Dad," she said on the screen, her young voice bright and full of life. "I know you are probably working really hard up there in space. Mom says you are always working, but I wanted you to know that I think what you do is important. I think exploring is important, and I think kindness is important too, more important than being the best or being the strongest. If you ever have to choose between those things, I hope you choose kindness. Love, your daughter." Watched the message for the first time in 3 years, and he did not look away until it ended. The young entity beside him did not understand human tears, but it understood emotion. It understood loss and healing, and the strange way that human hearts could hold both sadness and joy at the same time. "She would have liked what you did," Essence said gently. "I think so too," replied. "I think she would have been proud that I chose to try to save someone, even though I could not save her. I think she would have understood that some things are bigger than our own pain." On the Earth, as evening fell, Brooks and Elder stood in silence, watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. The stars were no longer points of distant light. They were markers of connection, of cooperation, of a galaxy that was learning to be better. "What do you think the future holds?" asked. "I think it holds challenges we have not yet imagined," said. "I think there will be crises and conflicts and moments when we doubt everything. But I think the galaxy has learned something important. We learned that the measure of a civilization is not how long it has lived, but what it chooses to do with the power it has been given." He paused, looking up at the stars. "The universe thought we were young, but we have shown that youth is not a liability. It is an opportunity. We are young enough to still believe that mercy matters. We are young enough to still believe that compassion can change the world. And I think that is going to make all the difference." As the night deepened, Brooks and Elder stood together in an Earth garden, one human and one ancient alien, watching over a reality that had been changed forever by a single choice. The choice to help instead of harm. The choice to understand instead of attack. The choice to believe that life was worth saving, even when saving it cost everything. And above them, the galaxies spun on, carrying within them the knowledge that the universe had been wrong about humanity. Humanity had never been young and foolish. Humanity had always been young and wise. The only thing that had changed was that finally the rest of the galaxy had learned to see it. Old, not powerful, not ancient, but wise, we became wise. The message traveled across the galaxy on waves of light. And somewhere in the space where the rift used to be, the refugees, guided to safety by humans who refused to let fear make them cruel, began their new lives in a dimension that had chosen compassion over destruction. The universe had tested humanity, and humanity had passed. O had decided compassion was worth the cost. Brooks sat back in his chair and closed his eyes. The universe had been set on fire by a simple question: is mercy more valuable than safety? The answer, it seemed, was going to be written by younger minds who had nothing to lose and everything to prove. The ancient races missed it because they were looking for the wrong thing. They were looking for reason and strategy. They were looking for patterns they had seen before, but Essence is not any of those things. Essence is just a child, lost in a dimension that does not belong to it, trying to survive. And I think that is exactly what will save us, because humanity has never been the kind of species that can ignore a lost child, no matter how alien that child might be. She paused. "We are going to try to save them. I hope the universe is ready for what humanity does when we decide to protect someone." The message was sent into the darkness, traveling at light speed back toward Prime. back toward the distant Earth and the billions of humans who still had no idea that their survival might depend on the compassion of two young explorers standing in a laboratory far from home. "All right," she said, "I'll do it. When do we leave?" 3 days. They are provisioning a research vessel called the Pathfinder. Gather your best people. We are about to find out if the universe was right to be afraid of us, or if the ancient ones were right to dismiss us as children playing with forces beyond our understanding. The stars shone on in the darkness, indifferent to the hopes and fears of creatures who lived such brief lives in their light.